Tatiana, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. Let me begin with the following. In my brief presentation, and I'm going to be brief to leave enough time for the discussion, for the roundtable. So I'll do my best to set the questions that are topical nowadays. As Roman has already mentioned, the very term public diplomacy appeared quite a long time ago. And I mentioned my book that I started writing in the end of 1990s. It's on modern model of diplomacy. The book was published in the year 2003, and there the topic is described in detail. I came to a conclusion that the very term public diplomacy needs to be understood in two ways. I mean, in the area of professional diplomacy, that's the meetings of diplomats with different audiences at the parliament, at the university, in NGOs, etc. The ambassadors went out of the shade, as I named it, but there's not only the professional diplomats, there's also the NGOs. NGOs also play an important role in public non-governmental diplomacy. These are very important topics, and I should mention
Нет такого концептуального документа.
that, unfortunately, we still have no conceptual document that would really disclose this notion. There is no document of a kind, though such documents do appear from time to time on the concepts of foreign policy. It would be good to do have such a document, and I hope something will appear soon, something will be published.
Где говорится
Recently, there was an official statement made in the central body of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that there they will organize a new department that will deal with the soft power strategy. Soft power is a key term, and of course, public diplomacy is the most important part of the soft power policy. So we shall get such a department of soft power. There it's mentioned that the new department shall undertake the development of the general policy of the Russian Federation in the field of international, cultural and humanitarian cooperation. Priorities shall be determined in the field intergovernmental agreements and control of carrying out of Russia's liabilities in this field, and to organize a program in this field. That's really a great thing to do. And as far as I understood, the experts did get a question. Won't these departments double the functions of the Россотрудничество body, Russian cooperation? Its function is also resolving such practical issues of international cultural and humanitarian connections. So there seems to appear one more body above the Россотрудничество, Russian cooperation body. It's hard to tell. It's too early to make conclusions. Well, it should be underlined that most important thing is that public diplomacy is, first of all, aimed at interactive dialogue. This is not a propaganda, since, as we know, propaganda is not aimed at a dialogue, and it's not a game with a zero sum when the winner takes all. In the dialogue, it's a win-win situation, and a certain common search is made for the resolving of the problem. one of the important actors of this dialogue should be the NGOs. They play a very important role, and they are internationally active. Here is the recent statistics I had. In the year 19 in Russia, there were 62 NGOs that have the status of consultants at the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations Organization. These are very important organizations and they are active internationally. There are many NGOs in Russia, and their activity may be called the internal political activity. Well, um, certain aspects of their activity cause active disputes, and we know that some of these organizations, altogether there are over 650 of those NGOs, but they are subject to the law on foreign agents. When that law was adopted in the year 12, it also caused very active disputes and criticism. I also wrote an article then. It was called Public Diplomacy and its Actors. The article was published by the Russian Council on Foreign Affairs, and there I mentioned in that article that this law causes concern both in Russia and abroad, and it may provoke or trigger certain protests. To my mind, the security bodies, the prosecutors, the Ministry for Internal Affairs, the Justice Ministry, they were quite able to act against any crimes or things that are illegal or against our legislation. So that was sufficient. And our legislation in the field is, I believe, much more stringent than similar laws in EU countries. So whether any additional laws were really necessary, I doubt that. I believe such issues with Western donors could have been settled in a diplomatic manner via negotiations, and that was probably planned initially. Really, when in the year 15 at the press conference, the journalists asked our president, Mr. Putin, about the essence of that law, when they said that it may have some unwanted consequences. His answer was, what arrests? Who is arrested? Name at least one name. Don't you invent things, was the answer. He underlined that this law will not have any negative consequences. Nowadays, a list was added of unwanted organizations, and 13 of those. And both president and his press secretary, Mr. Peskov, now mentioned that perhaps this law shall be revised and specified. That would be nice to get it revised. NGOs are part of the civil society, and their participation in public diplomacy, in dialogue with foreign partners on topical issues, including the issues of foreign policy, global policy, it's quite a necessity to have them. Well, I believe that those may be the NGOs that are in opposition to the government policy. Why not? Let me remind you that our representatives at the European Union, Mr. Chizhov, the extraordinary and plenipotentiary envoy, mentioned that. I mean, Mr. Chizhov. The government should tell precisely our concepts and what things may be done via the channels of public diplomacy, the way they do in EU. Anyway, the main areas of public diplomacy in EU are decided, and they believe that they're the main partner in European transit. They're the main donor in the field of cooperation and development, and it's an economic union that is looking for resolutions of problems. They promote the human rights protection via the dialogue at the top level with the EU partners. They do the strategic cooperation, including lobbying, for example, of the banning of death penalty. So I believe these activities in EU are quite successfully. They are conducted via the diplomatic channels, the EU delegations, via the NGOs, and their activity is quite efficient. I won't dwell on it for too long because I wrote a lot about it. If you're interested, you may check my materials in the internet. My book, Public Diplomacy, Theory and Practice, has a chapter dedicated to this topic, public diplomacy of the European Union. In conclusion, I'd like to mention the following. Yeah, sure. One shouldn't believe that uh, cultural cooperation, as it frequently happens, that cultural cooperation is just the organization of exchange of, say, movies, musicians, exhibitions. That's all very nice. Definitely, it's necessary as well. However, I believe at present, in during the um, period of the shift of paradigms, it's necessary to discuss the topical issues of modern time: climate change, vaccination, artificial intellect. Everyone is interested in these things. Militarization of policy is an important topic as well. Polarization of forces is also an important topic. It now takes place. There's a lot of issues. And I should tell you that Russia is interested in these issues. Sometimes we believe that our opinion is not considered in a foreign press. However, I believe they are interested. Let me share my personal experience. Recently, I was greatly satisfied by my talk with students from Europe. We discussed the issues of Russian diplomacy. This meeting, this discussion, was organized by the House of Russia in Brussels. Um, there were many questions coming from the European students. Young people were very interested in Russia. Recently, I was in the University of Pisa, Italy. They organized a very interesting conference on perestroika issues and the role of Gorbachev in carrying out of political, economic, and social reforms. I was a speaker at that conference. My presentation was dedicated to the evolution of stereotype approaches to the processes of integration. There were many other very interesting presentations, including archive data. People really know Russia well enough, and judging by the questions and discussions in PISA, the interest to Russia is very high. I should also mention that nowadays we have many more opportunities. We keep complaining about the pandemic. Yes, really, it's a catastrophe. It's horrible. However, we have many more opportunities for socialization nowadays. This meeting of ours is another confirmation of that.
There are different platforms which enable us to discuss the contemporary issues and the historic things, the future and the past. It's very convenient, and it is important to mention that it is cheap because there is no accommodation, travel expenses. Everything was expensive then, but now the opportunities are vast. So the discussions, therefore, happen. Let me quote Sun Tzu, who is wise, and his stratagems about the art of war. He says it's better to win without a battle. And you must debate to win without actual battles. Therefore, this format of our communication will survive the pandemic. And let me finish with this, my report presentation. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to participate in the debate. Thank you very much, Tatiana, for such an inspiring speech. Using these extra opportunities that was given to us by the augmented reality. You know, even media now uses this term, augmented reality. So I provided in our web chat the links to the works by Tatiana that she published and that she mentioned. These are not all of her works, just key publications which have the same ideas that were voiced by her. And now about the portal, the materials that are published there, you may also check up for the English translation. And later on, it will be easier for you to do the search on your own. Thank you very much, Tatiana. It is very valuable for experts and researchers because you are a bit ahead of your time. And it's good that you can see how your forecast, in fact, happens in reality. And you see that your forecast is not short term, it is long term and valid for the future. Therefore, please pay attention that ideas and certain themes that you presented in your works in 2014, 2016, they are still very timely. So, which speaks to the high value of your publications, materials, and research. Thank you. Before moving on with our agenda, do we have any questions to the speaker? Or, Elena, shall we reserve the questions to the very end? Let me think. Probably now will be the right time to ask. Let us not postpone them because other questions will be raised by further speakers. And any questions then? Do we have any questions, quick questions to the speaker? I do. I'm not an expert on public diplomacy, but of course, I thought of this topic and I made some data research. Other speakers will speak on the same topic and they will discuss the public diplomacy through education and research. In your speech, you mostly brought up NGOs. However, universities and research institutions, they are part of it or not? Do they have their role in the public diplomacy? And whether their influence becoming bigger or smaller as a tool for soft power, as an instrument of public diplomacy? Thank you very much for your question. Indeed, they are greatly important for the soft power policy. And I quite detailed described it in the book on the contemporary diplomacy model. And I also detailed the foreign policy of other states like the United States. And currently, China exhibits quite an interesting take on that. I visited China a couple of times, invited by universities prior the pandemic. In China, they have lots of students who go to study abroad to the United States and to other universities in other countries. Then they come back to their native country. And this educational exchange is very important. For example, our university, our institute MGIMO, the institute, the Moscow Institute of International Relations, we have a big exchange program in many ways. For example, we have students who study languages, and they are interested to visit the country or the region of the language, and they are sent to study in a university of that region or that country, and they will broaden their knowledge and have a network of friends they keep corresponding with. So this is at the bachelor level. At the master level, we have very wide connections in this respect. Recently, we set up many dual master degrees with other universities, where masters, both from our university and from the partner university, will write their master thesis and then defend them, and they have the dual degree as completed the master both in the domestic and in a foreign university. So, for example, they may be a foreign student and they have the diploma issued in Russia, in Moscow. We have courses delivered in a foreign language, in English, for those who don't know Russian and want to study disciplines or subjects in international relations delivered at our university. And these courses are at the bachelor and at the master level as well. So starting previous year, we have postdoctoral studies. PhD can be obtained both in Russia and in a foreign university through our partner relations. So our equivalent of PhD is the candidate of science. This is a promising avenue, but it requires funding. Therefore, there is a battle to increase the funding by the state to promote such exchanges, because I see it's a promising avenue for the public diplomacy, the way I see it and understand it. Unfortunately, the pandemic affected us. So therefore, physical exchanges and travel is not really possible to a large degree, and the number of exchange students has decreased. However, as I said in my final statement, this way of communicating through platforms will be taking over and will be the ultimate winner. We must use it actively and post lectures by most interesting researchers or educators. They must be posted there in Russian language, in English language. And this is exactly what's happening. And I believe this is quite a vigorous process. Did I answer your question? Yes, thank you. Let me add on just to show to what Tatiana said, the meta universe or Zoom universe increases and enhances our opportunities, provides bigger inclusiveness. Just a simple example, I had classes prior to our conference with foreign students, because foreign students unfortunately couldn't arrive to Russia. And this is the second year that we are forced to train them or teach them online. And it is really mind-boggling, because you are here in Russia, but at the same time you are connected to China, to Mauritius, to Korea, and to other countries. In fact, it expands your horizons. I hope you agree with me. And you have students who are very much interested, and therefore their performance is productive. So there is a long debate about benefits and disadvantages of online education. Let us put it aside. And let me say that you have to be looking into the future. It's a promising avenue, and don't be short-sighted. Consider the benefits of online education. Now we are forced to use these platforms, and those who didn't want to use them, they keep their opinion. But those who want to use these platforms as an opportunity to share opinions, this is not a barrier. In fact, it provides more tools. But this is just my private opinion, and I may be subjective. I hope Eric Varpachovsky and Angelika Zaitseva provide more input on this topic. But there was a question by Anna Ivazyan first. Thank you very much. Anna Ivazyan, I am from Institute of Europe of the Russian Academy of Science. Thank you very much for touching this theme of foreign agents, because post-Soviet states, they follow Russia and they adopt similar laws, and they cut off these communication channels. I don't think this is a correct thing, because researchers must be part of the academic community. So my comment is about Россотрудничество, Russian cooperation. You mentioned that the Department of Soft Power is to be installed and inaugurated. I happened to cooperate with the Russian cooperation, Россотрудничество, and they have this notion of compatriots. And I believe the compatriots as an audience, it's a kind of a limited limited term, because countryman means a Russian-speaking foreigner who shares similar culture values, or tries to move into Russia, or try to keep this tie with Russia abroad. So that's a definition of the fellow countryman. I believe sticking to this term, Россотрудничество limits the field of its activities. What do you think? Thank you very much for your question. I also had conversations with Россотрудничество employees. They always complained of underfinancing. Being underfunding, they spent most of the finance available working with the so-called near foreign countries, former Soviet republics. As of late, there are many talks that certain efforts is to be taken to provide decent financing, decent funding, to include other countries. There are many research, science and culture centers based globally in many countries and continents. And they must receive their share of attention as well. We hope that it will happen. Please keep your mic on. Indeed, that was a very important comment and clarification. We will follow whether certain work is happening and how this new department in the Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry opens. It will happen by the end of this year. And how they will delineate the obligations and competences between them and Россотрудничества, the time will tell, and certain managerial solutions will be found, I hope. Now, the breakdown between former Soviet republics and other countries. Россотрудничество is the federal agency on cooperation of the Union of Independent States, compatriots or countrymen living abroad, and on foreign and international cooperation. As you see, the first in this title, the CIS is mentioned. Since 1993, we had concepts like the concept for 93, 2000, 2008, 2013, and the current, the concept of 2016. The new concept is being prepared, but not published so far. But when it comes to regional priorities, so the priority is always given to the CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, or what we call the nearby former Soviet countries. When Mr. Primakov, Evgeny, joined the agency, the discussion started about diversifying the activity wider. But so far, the concept of the foreign policy hasn't been changed. Coming back to the countryman as the term, of course, you read this paper. I mean, the law of 1999, it's a federal law, the active edition of 2012 about the Russian state with regard to countrymen living abroad. And there is a term there, and here I would support Anna totally. This term is not really inclusive. It would have been more logical to adopt a wider point of view and include into the Russian world, not only those who speak Russian or have certain family connections to Russia, let's say their parents or grandparents were born in the former Soviet unions. For what's more important is not only speaking, but thinking in Russian. So, and uniting experts, researchers who use Russian in their intellectual work will be a promising avenue for future cooperation. And I'm satisfied when I hear that in our discussion, we touched upon similar themes. And thank you very much to Anna, who brought up this question as a comment, and to Tatiana, who provided the answer. I wanted to give the floor to Professor Zavershinsky, who wanted to raise the question. I'll be brief. Tatiana Vladimirovna, I'm your colleague in MGIMO, and I want to be optimistic when it comes to the prospects of public diplomacy. But because I am an expert in political science, therefore, I want to raise a question whether the outlooks are really optimistic when it comes to public diplomacy. Public diplomacy requires some space, public space, and certain institutional forms, both formal and informal formats. You mentioned a department. So the departments is part of the political institution engaged in the process. Of course, the public space and the public diplomacy cannot be provided only to non-commercial ways for non-commercial organizations. They will definitely become the arena for certain state influence. So what do you think about the public policy and using the non-formal formats? Is it informal formats? I believe the place is shrinking with a high speed. The Parliament Assembly, because we exist in the European space, let us discuss it. There is no dialogue that will promote public diplomacy. So, in fact, the Parliament Assembly is the space for politicians to make their speeches. And in fact, this is the political cheating, so to say. We have a horizontal links between the between the Council, the Assembly of Russia and the EU. However, it's again shrinking. We have the withdrawal of diplomats, and the space is become smaller. What, therefore, your take on of what institutions can use this um, uh, policy? Just our goodwill? I do not see any outlooks for the quality diplomacy, public diplomacy.
You know, it has to be supported. Otherwise, it's difficult to organize our things. Well, as for the optimism about modern technologies, you have already um, partially answered my questions regarding the problems in our university. There were big programs for students exchange, but they shrank due to COVID. Well, what's the basis for your optimism? Well, there is no political public space, and there are no institutes that used to exist in the past, but at present they don't seem to operate at all. Thanks for the question. That's a very difficult issue indeed, and it's not so easy to give a complete answer to it. However, I'm optimistic because finally, I believe um, they will understand that uh, being enemies is fruitless, and this contradiction is not only Russia's fault, it's also the fault of European countries who are so stringent with Russia. I believe one should overcome and get over the formed stereotypes. I have already mentioned during my presentation in Pisa, Italy, that one shouldn't follow stereotypes. For example, take a look at the period of Gorbachev's perestroika. At that period, there were forces in the West who didn't want to have a dialogue with Gorby because he was a communist. I would call it cave or primitive anti-communism. And that was also existing in politics, and it was an obstacle for the dialogue. That was so not only for Russia, but for Italy as well. In Italy, they used to have a big communist party, but they did take the path of Euro-communism. However, it was very much looked down upon. No probability or possibility of evolution was provided for them. So such a stringent, strict attitude is an obstacle for the dialogue, and it's against the public diplomacy policy implementation. I believe such discussions and opinion exchanges are important. Exchanges are important in the system of education as well, because we are teachers and we are responsible for forming of the mentality of the new generation, including politicians, diplomats, different leaders. Well, I have an impression that they're rather reasonable people, and Of course, they are eager to protect their national interests. However, they understand well the situation forming in Europe and the US, and they are willing to conduct a dialogue. So I remain optimistic due to that. Thank you very much. Konstantin, thanks a lot for a very detailed comment and for raising very topical issues. And thanks to Tatiana for adding to your opinion. I believe dealing with public diplomacy is hopeless unless you have some optimism, at least a minimum of optimism. Because, well, but one shouldn't be too pessimistic. This is decadence. Sometimes one may get pessimistic when looking at the reality. However, let us not lose hope and stay optimistic. There's a question coming. I need the... Yes, we stay within the Russian language, just the speaker has to switch on his microphone.
It's
Please
me?
get unmuted.
Yeah. So Tatiana, you mentioned the public diplomacy, and public means everybody is included. And you gave an example, your experience with China.
I'm so,
Unfortunately, we do not have the translation. We do understand, but those who don't cannot hear the Russian version.
Okay, okay.
На
So there is
русском
a
канале
technical
есть перевод.
Now, okay, then I will ask my question later on, yeah?
No. Now I see we have to switch on the... Коллеги, внизу надо
шарик
выбрать...
видно, да? Вот здесь вот внизу. Там нужно выбрать русский.
Just do switch on the translation function. We had it off. Now we'll switch it on. So please do ask your question.
Yes. Yeah, Tatiana, you mentioned the public diplomacy, and public includes all. And as an example, you mentioned China, and you mentioned students in China. Due to the fact I'm teaching 20 years regularly in China, I see a trend there. 20 years ago, I had to present all my presentations in advance. That means it was something like censoration. And this was less and less. And I would say the last 8-10 years, I could teach whatever I liked. There was no control anymore. And also on the other side, the students, they were asking questions. 10 years ago, it would have been a catastrophe when they would have raised questions like this in the public. The English become better of the students. And so that means we had a process of change, and it was forced, this internationality. For example, at the beginning, I was teaching more technical subjects, and more, I had to teach intercultural management, intercultural marketing, because the young people, the students, had more interest in how it's going on in other countries and to have more understanding to each other. How you, Tatiana, do you see a similar trend in Russia nowadays, or is it the same like 20 years ago?
Да, я могу сказать, ну, во-первых, я полностью согласна с тем,
I, first of all, should agree with you regarding your observations of China. I have the same impression, though I have a much smaller experience. I only visited China twice, but provided lectures there. I also encountered those students. They are much more relaxed, they feel free, they are asking questions, they are interested in everything, and they have great centers for learning languages. Centers for studies of Russia's policy, both in Shanghai and Beijing, and they have great experts over there. Many of them speak Russian, and their English is getting more and more improved, and more people can socialize in English in China. Also, they have a special radio and TV broadcasts with lessons of English organized by BBC in particular. So that's all happening. Now regarding our students, Russian students. Well, some teachers used to complain, the most conservative ones were complaining. They said that now many students are studying not free of charges. They pay for the education, but they are truants, so they are not very well prepared. They think if they pay money, they get knowledge, but this is not so. I'm of a different opinion. Year after year, I keep on noticing that many students are very knowledgeable, very well prepared, and very enthusiastic. This is partly due to a huge volume of information that they can use now. So they have a chance to check and search different materials. They can find a lot of interesting lectures in the internet, both from Russian and foreign lecturers. So there are many gifted, talented, and interested students nowadays. So the trend is rather positive to my mind.
Okay. Yeah, in general, we can say that the younger people, the IQ get higher and higher. So that means the young people have a higher IQ as we, the teachers. And this we have to respect. So they have not just more information, they also have more quality in their brain.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, you're right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Поистине счастлив тот народ, у которого юношество тянется к знаниям.
Happy is the nation in which youth is striving towards knowledge. So thank you for your comment and for this exchange of opinions. And you shared your own personal experience of lecturing in China. Not all the colleagues do have such experience, and we don't know how soon we'll be able to lecture in China due to the pandemic limitations. Well, to be able to stick to the schedule, I suggest that we continue. There's a presentation announced on scientific diplomacy, but I'll be very brief with this presentation. I'll provide for you just the gist, and I'll provide you with an example, vaccine diplomacy, quite a topical example. I'll be brief so that to give enough time for the following colleagues, Erik Pavlovsky, Angelika Zaitseva, and Anna Ivazin, so that they have enough time for their presentations to tell us new things about the soft power, new tools, including online education and what's happening with it in the post-Soviet space. So that's what I wanted to tell you. I observe the situation not only from the point of view of an expert, but from the point of view of a common person. I remember the dispute from a year and a half ago. Everyone was telling that now we need scientific diplomacy, and it's a vaccine subtype, the vaccine diplomacy. That's a new challenge created by pandemic. Pandemic is not a political phenomenon, hence disregarding all the hazards of the pandemic. It is a tragedy, in fact. Disregarding that, mankind and professional diplomats and politicians and the goodwill people and the scientists should get united and develop certain decisions in public space, as Konstantin Fyodorovich mentioned, and we should be pretty open when doing that. That was the optimistic intention, and it was like a mantra similar to euphoria. Now we'll get together, develop a vaccine, have a breakthrough, get vaccinated, and thus we'll overcome the
в итоге-то что получилось, да, как?
the pandemic. Nice plans, but it didn't work out. Remember the famous memes of students from different countries, expectations and reality. Or, as a famous writer said, yes, the intention was great, but the execution was lousy. All the countries developed their vaccines independently. Friendship is friendship, but business is separate. Well, where is that declared international cooperation in the field? I believe that actually the vaccine/scientific diplomacy failed. Next fail was at the trade and economic level. Now, we have no one to blame besides those bats, so don't blame anyone. Do develop the vaccine. Vaccines were developed and they started to get them promoted. And it was mentioned that developing countries need some assistance, say African countries. They don't have the technological opportunities to produce and develop a vaccine. So our Sputnik and Pfizer and Moderna were planned to be sent there. You know, till nowadays, Russian citizens can't get vaccinated with foreign vaccines, and a Russian vaccine, including that most modern one, the nasal spray, is not available abroad, or it's scarcely available. I don't like statements like there's a Cold War in the field of vaccines. That's alarmism. I remain optimistic as well. You can't kill me, same as Tatiana. However, it's a must for us to state that we observe a certain kind of vaccine nationalism. Yesterday at the ceremony of the presentation of the letters of commendation in Kremlin, 20 ambassadors from different countries were handing in their presentation documents, but they were actually, it wasn't done in person. However, according to the protocol and the ceremony, there was a greeting coming from the president, and that notion vaccine nationalism was, first of all, pronounced. So it's observed on the level of technology, on the level of trade and economy. Now it's getting to the third level, that is the level of consulates and international law. The question is how to acknowledge those QR codes and the health passports, etc., etc. So one should have considered that yet at the level of an implementation of those vaccines. What were they for? They were for restoration of people's mobility, including what's important for us, the academic mobility, but somehow they forgot about it. And disregarding the statements of experts in science, disregarding the statement of our president, he said, let's develop a certain kind of a regulation on the level of public diplomacy so that the vaccination certificates of different countries are acknowledged in other countries. So we do not observe any cooperation in this field. Our foreign partners seem to not be in a rush with it. So I would say those statements remained statements. What will happen in future? Time will show. We'll live and we'll see. I don't want to be too optimistic about it. I don't want to idealize. Problems do exist. They're structural, they are essential, but I believe they're resolvable. We keep hoping.
That the global community will make certain conclusions and update the course. So, finally, next time, personally for us, we will be able to meet face to face and have our work connections in real world. So I will send you a link both in English and in Russian because these themes abstracts were recently published at the website of the International Discussion Club, Valdai Discussion Club. You've probably heard about this platform. I will send the link and will be happy to get your comments on them. So are there any questions? I will answer them and then we'll move on and we'll give the floor to other colleagues to present. Any questions? Thank you very much for your COVID-based presentation, because we are observers of the current reality, of the COVID reality. We will have a small pause for a group photo. So if possible, please have your cameras on, because we need to provide certain reports. We have 23% present, and I welcome you to open your cameras so we can see the real people. So don't be shy. If you can, please switch on your cameras and we will make a shot, a screenshot. Then you'll get this group photo from us. So don't be shy. Keep your cameras on. We don't see many, 23 persons, but on the screen I see only 7 persons who have their cameras on. Please have your cameras on. I am shy. There are people who are anti-vaccine and there are anti-camera persons. They are afraid to show their image. Well, especially speakers, I asked them to have cameras on. Can you have your cameras on, please? Because we need some reporting. Okay, I see your pictures. Great. The picture is taken. Great. We may continue. We may continue according to the agenda. Otherwise, I was afraid we will forget. And that's important to keep documenting our meetings. Let us continue. So we have discussions. They are quite lengthy, and let us give all speakers their time to present, and then probably we will raise questions at the very end as part of the shared debate. What do you think? Indeed. You know, a neighbor of mine with his building instruments, perforators, decided to join into the discussion. Sorry for the background noise. I'm giving the floor to Erika Warpachowski. He's a researcher at the Higher School of Economic University, and he will speak about mass open line courses as a tool of public diplomacy. The floor is yours, Eric's. I will share my screen. It will be more interactive, I hope. Can you see my slides? Can you see my screens? Yes. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Eriks Warchapovsky, and I'm with the HSE University, and also represent Journal of Public Diplomacy. Sorry for self-advertising, but if you want to publish your articles on public diplomacy, please send them to our journal. We will be happy to accept them. And also, I'm a researcher affiliated with the and it is located in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. So my primary field is public diplomacy, and I in fact submerge into different political processes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? These are my links, as I promised. Please continue. I'm interested in education because that's a paramountly important component in public diplomacy. This component is wide, and I decided to test a new trend in education. Here I mean MOOC, Massive Open Online Courses. Everyone knows what I'm talking about because of pandemic. Then I will give you more information about MOOC and on remote education in general. I will touch about the concept of MOOC as part of public diplomacy. And then we move into the practice, six scenarios or 6 strategies, whichever you want to call them, how these courses can be used as an instrument of public diplomacy. Okay, let me start with the timeliness of remote education. It is extremely timely. In fact, even prior to COVID, some already thought about it. Even in the 19th century, first universities emerged where you can study by correspondence. So you can correspond, communicate through letters with these educational establishments. And this was used by individuals who physically cannot attend universities, or they had no financial means, or geographically separated or separated through class or race. Remote education has its history. And there are 2 major turning points in the history. First, this is the 20th century when remote education was delivered through radio and TV. Higher education or secondary education or even elementary education could be delivered through TV, like the Sesame Street, in fact, can be watched by small kids and they can be educated this way. The end of the 20th century brought us the internet, and it was used for the education. In 2008, the first MOOC course was launched in the United States, I think. And we can say that 2008 was the year of MOOC birth. In 2011, American professors run an MWOC were simultaneously 160 persons, 166 were engaged, and it was a breakthrough for the online education. Very often, this is like the internet-based education. The process goes hand in hand sometimes with the international basis for the education, because now we have the option of studying disciplines, not only domestically, but at foreign universities, or you may be a student at a domestic university, but manuals are foreign. So we have this MWOC. They were not initially linked to the internalization of education, but these two processes started simultaneously. And in terms of classification, sometimes MWOC are part of so-called educational internationalization, sometimes not. It can be debated. So our education still pursues educational goals. Let me explain further. Meaning, education is a tool for indoctrination, because being educated, a person absorbs along with information to survive or to have certain skills. Along with it, we absorb symbolic information, we get stereotypes taught to us. And later on, these stereotypes can affect our behavior. There is a proverb in English. Let me rephrase it into Russian. If you want to feed a person, give him a fish and he will be fed for one day. But if you want to keep him fed for his entire life, teach him fishing. So, and as we teach people fishing, we can either impose or inform what are the best fishing rods and what are the best fishing locations. So this information tags along with the teaching stuff, and later on will impact his or her behavior. Some statistics to share. There is a trend of increasing globally online courses. As you see, year 25, due to COVID, 1/3 of US respondents said that they used certain online courses to study certain disciplines. So the statistics is available. I think in any country, the trend will be the same. Now, let us see the growth of that education. Use China statistics as an example. The growth is perfect. Again, thanks to COVID, we have a doubling of figures for certain segments, and online education is available not only for higher or tertiary education, but even for K-12, that's secondary education, and for preschoolers. We see some online education for preschoolers and then K-12. And therefore, online education is here to stay with the humanity. This statistics is valid not only to China, but to the majority of global countries. Now, MWOC specifically. Very often, these are the courses that can be purchased online. You can see the platforms which offer such courses, mostly American aggregators like Coursera, EAX, Class Central. There is, however, one British platform, Future Learn. And we also see the Indian aggregators are developing along with Chinese aggregators. They are doing well and actively used by the relevant audiences. There is a competition, and aggregators compete with each other in terms of discipline-based content, but also universities compete because they place their content on the platform. Russian universities are active at publishing and posting their courses at these platforms as well. Now, the number of courses, this is the Future Learn platform statistics. The number of courses available to the platform subscribers has grown multifold over the years from 255,000 to over 1,100,000 users. Again, this is a trend that we're moving toward the online education. It is here to stay. Now, the concept of how public diplomacy can use MOOC as a unit, as a component. We have a general idea, and most researchers support it, saying that public diplomacy includes education as a component as a part. And through education, public diplomacy can use its soft power, and the country can impact the behavior of other countries through the soft power. At the same time, there are other sub-concepts of public diplomacy, and here I mean educational diplomacy, culture diplomacy, assistance or help diplomacy. They overlap with educational diplomacy in its different segments, because the influence is exerted over different types of audiences. So let us not go further into details when it comes to segmentization, because the structure is quite complex when you put all elements together. Let us talk about education. However, it has many subdivisions. For example, elementary school education, secondary education, tertiary education, and then we have MOOC, and they provide courses and disciplines for secondary and vocational training, and probably for tertiary education as well. Let us now speak about the practicalities. There is an interesting strategy, the first one which I identified is teaching history and culture. Many organizations, including university and private institutions, they teach a culture or history of a certain country. And very often we see that culture subjects and languages are taught by an institution which is foreign to the country. For example, I have a short screenshot from Coursera. This is the University of California at Santa Cruz, and they offer Russian history courses. And there are 36,000 students attending the online course. So the Higher School of Economics and UNECON and St. Petersburg State University, they do have Russian history courses, but their audience is much smaller. The strategy is important, however, because it is the way of shaping the attitude towards the country through the class, through the course, and the attitude will or may impact the behavior. Imagine that you are a country and you don't teach the culture or history of your country. The niche will be occupied by somebody else. And once it is occupied, then the attitude and perception of your country won't be the one you would have preferred. Therefore, MOOCs could be a highly strategic element, especially for courses in history and culture. Another interesting strategy to highlight, this is the promoting of the national higher education system. If you consider the students who take MOOCs, they may take several lessons within the discipline, a course just to taste the education in this country, and they will try to enroll with this university, this specific university. And if they fail, they will go to another university, which is part of the same national educational system. Let's say I failed to enroll into one American university, I will go to another one because I like overall the educational system of the United States.
And as colleagues have mentioned, there exists the exchange system, say foreign students are coming to Russia, and we are interested in it. And for them to do come, we need to sell well that system to them. We need to do the marketing, and MOOCs are active in this field. MOOCs or MOOCs for short. The third strategy is, and it's in the system of forces they've allocated. There's the compulsory power, institutional power or force, and the structural relations, structural powers. It's when, for example, we have two elements in the system, and in between these elements, there's a certain hierarchy. Both elements are happy with the system. However, one of the elements, the actor with higher hierarchy, has certain power over the one in the lower hierarchy. Well, this system may work due to the fact that English is still the main language in MOOCs, and hence that's the domination of the English language, lingua franca. Most universities that participate in MOOCs may manipulate the agenda. They're the language carriers, they have a higher position in this hierarchy. And other countries with no native English, with no content in English, are just the consumers. And hence, they need to agree with the will and decisions of the higher educational establishments that are high in hierarchy, that are master English. So, structural relations. These platforms are frequently located, based in the United States, and there are certain separate MOOCs that are provided by global corporations. One should understand the following important thing. When Google is starting as a course, or so does the IBM or Facebook, they train people to work in their systems. Hence, the audience, the people in future, would rather use the products of IBM, Facebook, and Google due to those connections. These corporations shall be like a template. They'll be higher in hierarchy, and they will use their power to manage lower actors, perhaps other corporations or different countries. The fifth strategy is more humanitarian, but some of the scientists believe that MOOCs may be used to provide education to the developing countries, which is a good thing. And this education shall positively impact the economy growth, the safety in the country. However, they'll raise an educated, loyal, and safe neighbor in international relations. It may be perceived as neocolonialism, achieved via educational and technological methods. And the last strategy to be described, well, it's a kind of a side effect. In fact, it's non-direct impact of participation in MOOCs. MOOCs require cooperation between many different actors, teachers, lecturers, students, platforms, providing the access to the training materials. And due to cooperation between the actors, all of them are forming a reputation. If it's good, it may be transferred and used in the next projects within or outside MOOCs. This will impact certain audience and their behavior. I did my best to brief you on the topic. Sorry if I took a bit too much time. Thank you for attention. I'll be happy to take your questions. Thanks a lot, Eric. Never mind. It's okay that you took a bit too much time. We don't have very strict regulations in this field. As they say, they have the watch and we have time. We are not in a hurry. And thanks for a very detailed explanation of the issues. Before we give the floor to the next speaker, her topic is related to your topic a lot. Let me just tell you something. I believe it's important. It's not spoken about a lot. So I mean the including of inclusivity or inclusiveness via MOOCs. Here is my personal experience. I've had students in MGIMO, Institute for International Relations, and in the other educational establishments where I lectured abroad, mainly in Italy, people who are handicapped, and they needed to be assisted to visit my lectures. Either family members or social employees would assist such handicapped students. And everyone is trying to do their best to assist them. They provide ramps, etc. Anyway, when I have such a student in a class, he looks different from the other students. And when I have to test their knowledge, I always keep in mind the difficulties that they encounter. Somewhat subconsciously, the student may have a feeling that I'm giving a better score, not for the knowledge only, but also considering their special circumstances and difficulties. This may cause a certain psychological complexes. I'm sure they do take place. But with this online environment, the benefit of it is that there is no face-to-face meeting, and in front of the computer screen, even people like Stephen Hawkins look more or less normal. We don't observe their difficulties. We just see everyone is equal and feels equal, which is a good thing, I believe. Yeah, of course, there are drawbacks, like sometimes the internet fails. It just happened to me. I missed part of your presentation because The internet failed, but now I restored my Zoom communication. Hope it will last for yet another hour. Disregarding all the negative things, I believe the internet connection improves inclusiveness from the point of view of geography, nations, countries, and from the point of the view of medical condition of the audience. We're now getting more equal. Considering this fact, I suggest that we switch to the next speaker. We'll give the floor to Angelica, the assistant professor of the University of the People's Friendship. I really like this educational establishment. Both me and Tatiana used to lecture there, and we like this institution, this educational establishment a lot. So, Angelica will tell about education as a soft power concerning a foreign policy. Let me also tell you something before we give her the floor. I asked Angelica, though her presentation was a bit different, but I asked her to touch upon this context. Because this very educational establishment was created, it was founded as a soft power tool, starting yet from the period of the Soviet Union, the Institute for the of People's Friendship or Nations Friendship. Most of the students were foreign, yet during the Soviet time, if you remember that. Yeah. This educational establishment yesterday, when the ambassador of Guinea um, um, presented his credentials, he said, I still have the mentality of a Soviet person because he studied in Russia in the Agricultural Institute. He wasn't ashamed to say, my mentality is that of a Soviet person. Isn't that a great achievements of the then Soviet soft power? Okay. Good day, dear colleagues. Thanks for your kind words. It was mentioned several times that I will tell about the transformation of soft power factor in education in modern conditions, in the conditions of pandemic. Part of my presentation is dedicated to that. Also, in my presentation, I would like to tell you about some other certain aspects of regarding the soft power. Let me share my screen. It was mentioned, I am from the Russian University of People's Friendship, the chair of comparative politology. Please make it full screen if possible, and also we would like to see your face. Switch on the camera, please.
Ладно.
Please reveal your face. Don't be like a Muslim woman. Well, education as a soft power and a resource of Russia's foreign policy. Education was always very important, both for internal and foreign policy, and the contacts between the representatives of academia are pretty ancient. And though the modern reality has modified a bit. Let me tell you that nowadays education is considered not as a tool for transfer, accumulation, and generation of knowledge, but also it may help to create the positive image of the country internationally. That is a soft power tool. However, education is now regarded as soft power tool since the recent time due to the new global humanitarian trends. Initially, the author of this term, American politologist Joseph Nye, has included three parts of the soft power: cultural values, political, and foreign policy values. At the bottom, you see a small quote, not from Joseph Nye, but to Joseph Nye. In short, hot power is push, hot power is pull. I'll provide a brief translation. Hard power is a push, a strong push, or the impact, and soft power is gentle push. At present, promotion of education is for several purposes, scientific, social, economic, etc. And these goals can't be achieved without a uniform strategy and certain activities in the field. You keep staying on the same slide. Is that your desire? No, it should be different. I just failed to click them. Can you see the second slide? Yes. Soft power, the means of success in world politics. That's the explanation. In short, hard power is push, soft power is pull. Well, let me explain when exactly education started to be regarded as a soft power source in a modern Russia. I should begin with the USSR period. At that time, this term didn't exist yet, soft power. However, the phenomena did exist in the USSR, nearly since it's the foundation of the USSR. Education and its popularization at that time. First of all, they taught Russian language abroad, and scientific exchange was organized and supported. The final objective of that activity was forming the positive image of the Soviet Union in the capitalist countries and dissemination of socialist ideology. In 1960s and 70s, they had quite a success in their activity, in particular thanks to foundation of Patrice Lumumba University of Nations of Friendship. In the Soviet Union, they trained students from Africa, Latin America, and Asia. At the time, it was a purely political project and quite a successful one. So nowadays, Patrice Lumumba University keeps forming Russia's positive image. It's in many ratings. Many high officials of different countries graduated from Patrice Lumumba University, including prime ministers, presidents, and really the atmosphere there is nice, very informal, democratic, and international. Thus, the graduates are becoming the envoys of soft power. The issue remains topical, and nowadays the Patrice Lumumba University remains a unique educational establishment that has accumulated great experience and practice of training foreign students. And it would be good to scale this experience in other regions and higher educational establishments. At present, education in Russia is a tool for long-term political influence and promotion of our agenda internationally. And in foreign policy of Russia, they pay rather big attention to the education. Yes, the export of Russian education necessity is mentioned in many strategic documents. Let me briefly list them. These are the main positions. They are on the screen. Later I will share my presentation so that you can familiarize with it. That's the concept of foreign policy of Russian Federation, the year 2016, the order of the President of Russia on the national objectives and strategic um, tasks for the development of Russia till the year 2040, a federal project called Education Export within the national project Education. Also, among those is the strategy of national security of Russia. Now, speaking in general, the essence of the positions about education in these documents is as follows. Upgrading is necessary of the national education system, and one should preserve traditional Russian values, culture, historical memory, and fortify Russia's role in the global humanitarian, scientific, and educational space. Next, now let us discuss the activities and measures being done for popularization of Russian education internationally. Among those, there's the activity of special bodies abroad, like, for example, it's not only abroad, but within Russia, as well like Rosatrudnичество body, Russian cooperation. It has already been mentioned today. Expert activities, conferences like the forums of deans and rectors, and there are many more other activities as well. Special attention should be paid to such tools of Russian education as specialized government programs.
The first program in this line is a 5-100 project with key factors presented on the slide. It took 8 years to implement the project. The main idea was to have 5 selected educational establishments of Russia to enter into international rankings like thanks high education and other educational rankings. 21 universities were selected out of 6 federal districts or regions. 2 regions were not included, like North Caucasus and Southern region of Russia. Well, the project failed. Only Moscow State University just managed to enter one institutional ranking, but Moscow State University was not part of the project. However, along with the drawbacks, there is a good thing about the project because it became an impetus to reform the Russian education. And thanks to this failed project, certain leaders in the university community were identified, the science got higher status, and it became clear that you must actively involve universities into foreign affairs. And the number of publications with indices at Web of Science and Scopus has increased 2.5-fold. That was the growth of foreign students in these universities. Well, there are certain negative things to mention about the project, like experts said there were barriers to the true internationalization of Russian education, and low key performance indicators when it comes to involving foreign professors, and also some malpractices in improving the ranking in international publications were identified, like publishing at junk journals were identified. However, this project became a trigger for better changes, for changings for the better. Now coming to the soft power, how to increase the attraction of Russian and appeal of Russian education. In fact, the Project 5 to 100 raised the profile and the need of being engaged, and in fact made these universities more attractive. And this project now is substituted with another one, the 2030 priority. The hard lessons of yesterday, of the previous project, were learned. And this project was launched this summer. The number of participants grew tenfold. 121 universities participate with the representation of all federal regions. The program is more geared toward internal development. However, the upgrading of the education system goes hand in hand with the competitiveness and the competitive potential of these universities. Now there is an agenda to create the leaders, the leading universities in the new knowledge agenda, and they will help regions to develop. When it comes to challenges to the funding model, these challenges were removed in the new project. Currently, it is difficult to say what are the risks long-term for the program. We expect that it will continue developing positively. Here is my next topic about ranking when it comes to soft power. There are not many of such rankings. Mostly they are kept by European countries. European countries mostly maintain them. There are 3 rankings on the slide, both from the UK. All 3 of them are from the UK. The first one covers only education. And there is only one criteria for the ranking, which is the number of global or world leaders who were trained in the country of this institution and who made a high career. So the ranking holders have this classical idea that foreign students become the point of transmitting the values of the country where they were educated, and becoming a high official, they will retain the positive attitude to the country where they were educated. So the ranking authors recognize, however, that this is not an all-inclusive indicator. However, in this ranking, Russia made into top 5 countries. In 2021, it has 10 for the indicator when it comes to acting global leaders, but the difference between Russia and the leaders, the UK and the USA, is quite big. In the US, there are 65 world leaders. In the UK, it's 57 world leaders who studied in these countries. The second ranking is named Global Soft Power Ranking. Again, this is the current year data. So the rankings are done globally. I believe starting 2016 for this particular ranking. This ranking is more general and sums up several indicators in the criteria, and they are listed in the under criteria like business and trade, management, international relations. Let us come to the education and research and to the sub-index of this particular criteria. So it covers such aspects as strong educational system, leadership in research, and activity level when it comes to the implementing of advanced technologies. So these are sub-indices Coming to Russia and its performance, as you see, unfortunately, when it comes to the education criteria, sorry, I moved slides to the wrong one. Bear with me for a second. This is the wrong rating. This is the wrong ranking, sorry. Let me rephrase it. Okay, Russian performance drops down year to year. And this is true for the third ranking, the soft power 30, where Russia currently is on the 30th position in total and in the 20th position when it comes to solo education, just to education only. Conclusions. Based on this information, which I took from the rankings. In fact, the education now has its strong position among other criteria, and it hasn't been long. And we assess the rankings assess not only the number of foreign students, but other important sub-indices like the funding provided to the development of the educational systems in the country, the publication, performance and activity, and whether the country is capable of setting the trend in technologies, and whether the country is capable of developing and promoting its technologies. So now it is also assessed. Probably Russia needs to pay more attention to the criteria of the rankings when it writes in its own programs to transform the national education. Because some criteria show the difference. For example, 5 to 100 project, according to the state requirements, the more students were tutored by one professor, the better was the indicator. However, the world's university ranking has the council, and the council says that the dependence is reverse. The less students are tutored by one professor, the performance is better. Let me now move to the transformation of the education soft power during COVID pandemic. Of course, when borders closed down and limits introduced, the habitual or usual student flows got interrupted. Russia had many foreign students, and therefore the image of the university was greatly affected by the way the institution supported its foreign students. The share of long-distance remote educational technologies grew, so even exams were taken online. Of course, we shall recognize it, that this format somewhat impacted the quality of education, but this is not the main topic of my presentation. Let me mention the intercultural component, because it is part of the attitudes, the way they are shaped when foreign students live in Russia. Of course, this component is losing its power during long-distance education, and it is difficult to use online courses as the way to promote Russian culture and to be the element of soft power. However, let us consider the statistics. So the pandemic aside, let us consider the statistics for the last and this year. The number of foreign students in Russia stays exactly the same. And possibly, no, indeed, it even grew slightly. And we see in practice that students do want to go back to face-to-face education or to hybrid education. And we will have to put up with it, that there will be two more formats to the education. Now, summing it up, the potential of Russian education as an instrument of soft power is there, but not totally used to the total extent. Then we consider the changing circumstances because of the pandemic and the long distance or remote education has not been used to its full potential at all. But Russia has a good chances because it's one of the leaders when it comes to the education quality. There are barriers which restrain the growth of Russian appeal, however. With this, I would like to wrap up my presentation. It's like a sketch on the theme, which is wide, and I just highlighted certain elements at certain aspects and angles. Thank you very much. In my opinion, and I hope my colleagues will support me, that you succeeded in attaining your objectives because you showed us the rankings and you analyzed them pretty much in detail. This is an important area. It affects everyone. Things are changing, as we see. Just yesterday, the first aircraft arrived and brought students to Russia. And you see people in their profiles are now using QR codes. This is the element of high technology. We've received students from Afghanistan, and this is against and regardless of the complicated pandemic situation and domestic difficulties in Afghanistan. And yet they arrived to study in Russia. So Russian education is being exported and Russian educational system attracts foreign students. So we see the positive movement in this direction. And I think most of us know what I'm talking about. Thank you very much, Angelica. And just to be in time and giving the floor to every speaker, if our moderator Elena does not object, I will give the floor to Anna Ayvazyan, and then we can sum up the entire panels, and we can raise questions, compare the questions, and discuss all three presentations in one go. But first, I will give the floor to Anna Ayvazyan, who is a researcher in the Institute of Europe of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Before Anna takes the floor, let me just inform you. So we are not limited in terms of Zoom time. As long as you can stay with us, we can continue discussing. We do not have the very tight deadline to finish this meeting. So we can stay till morning. Well, not till morning, but we have enough topics to discuss. So if your time permits, we can stay a bit longer. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Well, I attended some event of this center that it was about European identity for PhD students and young tutors. And in fact, I write about the norms and policy of the EU in the Southern Caucasus countries. And I consider all these norms and norm setting at different interaction areas. But I thought about your theme and I rearranged my presentation. And let us consider the foreign policy of the EU in Southern Caucasus countries. Russian researchers may be interested in the theme as well, especially those who research Russian Federation soft power, those who research the post-Soviet republics. In my presentation, I will cover the values promoted by the EU when they offer programs at Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. These are Southern Caucasus countries. The EU is a good body to study. All these values are formalized, and the EU pursues the explanation of its identity. When they cooperate with partner countries, the values are formalized in action plans and in programs, and the values are the criteria whether there is a forward movement in the cooperation. And this is exactly how we see what was on paper promoted in practice. And they also track how partners absorb the values and what are the limitations. So this value field experiences some competitions because there are different actors. The research already has been on like for 10 years at least. And the ability to set up your own game rules is part of your competitive power in the foreign policy. Mm-hmm.
And there are non-Western countries that do promote democracy. You can't now say that the West is democratic and the rest of the world is not, since in countries that promote democracy, not only the West, or say European countries, namely Brazil, India, Indonesia, Japan, Turkey, Japan, South Africa. They also promote democracy, and they say observe the elections and control the process of elections, etc. Democratic values. Different political forces mention them, and they get more and more, say, diluted. There already exists a certain market of values, and partner countries may choose who they want to cooperate with, depending on what model of values is offered to them. And there are different models of nations' development existing at the market. The post-Soviet space and the CIS countries do have a choice now, and they're looking for successful practices to copy. Today, there was a speaker who mentioned about the who mentioned post-Soviet identity oriented at the past, but in South Caucasus countries, the questions which way to develop was topical in 1990s. It is especially topical at present, since this region is politically dynamic. Things keep happening there. Authorities get replaced. There are political reforms that take place, and political elites keep searching for successful models, and they do participate in that dialogue on values. Well, this topic is important for Russia for quite a number of years. For example, here is an article of Konstachev from the year 19. It was called Not the Fish, but a Fishing Rod. And it's mentioned that foreign partners should offer Russia not a product, but a tool for getting this project, for achieving the success. He even suggests certain values for Russia, that is cooperation, safety and security, and sovereignty. Well, among the researchers in South Caucasus countries, there are those who published the articles with attempts to determine the ideology of Russian foreign policy. It's not formalized. However, authors have created certain images in this or that way. Well, if you note the strategy of national security of the Russian Federation, it doesn't mention the issue of moral leadership and creating a positive model for the future order in peace in the world and the center of political development, because the global order is being changed. And there's a phrase, harmonic combination of a strong power and prosperity of people will create a prosperous society. And this is very similar to what EU is translating in for partner countries. So there's not much of a difference between us. I'd like to briefly touch upon what EU is telling. There are different methods of assessment and interpretation. For example, in my thesis, I mentioned three areas. That's democratic reforms, condition of citizens, or prosperity, the level of life of citizens. I mean, if they feel protected, if they're secure, if they have access to education, if they have opportunities for career growth, participation in political life, mobility, and safety and security is also important. Here are some extracts from the global strategy adopted in the year 16. It says that the objectives of the Union and of its citizens go hand in hand. And the communication that EU is relying on, communication channels are very multiple. EU is looking not only for the political cooperation on the higher level, they are looking for cooperation between different actors, like in between the civil societies, and that was mentioned in the beginning of the discussion, between business communities, politicians, between students, between the youth, between women entrepreneurs, etc. Besides, EU is more frequently focusing on the so-called associated rights that include not only the individual rights, but the rights of certain groups. Recently, especially since the year 20, the EU programs and programs of cooperation with the countries of South Caucasus mention not only the vulnerable groups, but simply the groups of actors. For example, small and medium enterprises, municipalities. EU is deciding on who to cooperate with rather precisely. The global strategy also has such a term as sustainability or resilience. Russian researchers translate it in many ways. I would say it's similar to sustainability of the government bodies and structures, and it's achieved. This resilience is achieved by cooperation between different countries, and that includes protection of human rights and a struggle against corruption and terrorism. All this is carried out in practice, and this practice is kind of shared by EU with the other countries. Each of the projects, each of the programs has these mentioned and has these values mentioned. Now let me brief you on how such programs are being carried out. For quite a long period of time, EU supported certain projects. For example, female business or business women were supported. And one could see which company received the grant and check if they really conducted the trainings for business women, and whether these um, women really founded companies and started selling dried fruit or making carpets. That's topical for South Caucasus. You mentioned the regional development. Besides, EU is supporting the already existing government programs. It's not so easy to assess the success of such programs. However, there are general economic parameters that justify the growth, like, for example, the growth of income. EU provides the macro-financial assistance, and it relates cooperation with political reforms. There are also non-direct methods of impact, like socialization of elites, or one can see like that in Georgia and Armenia. Among the political elite, there are more and more people that did get education in the West. And this really modifies the political orientation and the general notion on how the state should be governed, how life should be organized in these countries. Because 30 years of independence gave life to a new generation who are now studying in the European universities, and there are volunteership programs as well, so they can see, they know, they have a chance to choose, and they do choose. One may say that on its behalf, Russia does not provide such a huge number of opportunities as EU does, and recently this impacted even the knowledge of Russian language among the population. In Armenia, for example, we have Russian schools. That's an Armenian educational program, but Russian is taught as well. Armenia has Russian universities, but still more and more young people do speak English, but they don't speak Russian that well. And quite often, rather talented physicists or mathematicians would rather go to the West and go studying there instead of Russia. What else is being done in EU? In EU, they position very well the separate successful initiatives. They are always mentioned in the documents and demonstrated as a positive, successful practice. For example, inclusive bakery Imre, or the EU school creation in Georgia. EU always has a selection of such successful cooperation cases that may be presented as a parameter proving that the situation is improving in partner country. Let me brief you on limitations and obstacles. They are mainly related to interpolitical modifications. I mean, all the three countries of the region. First of all, the South Caucasus region. That's where a foreign policy risk is very high. Remember, the political modifications are related to the growth of political instability, like there was the Velvet Revolution in Armenia, and they became a parliament republic. Of course, there's no direct connection between the phenomena. However, any internal political instability in Armenia led to foreign policy instability. Well, in this case, the country couldn't avoid getting into the war, since in many years, no strategy was developed on what's to be done if the war does take place. and the foreign policy partners didn't have such a strategy as well. EU did with just the declarations. The only partner that Armenia could rely on was Russia. Well, that brings us to a conclusion that the values announced inside the country not equal to using the same value on values on international level. That's what happened in Armenia after the new people came to power. You know, when new people come to power, it does not always mean that the political institutions shall become different. If those institutions don't function anyway, why to expect modifications, disregarding many hopes of both the population and external partners? Well, next obstacle or limitation is related to the following. The values of EU should be shared not only by certain personalities in politics, but they should be understandable to all the citizens. When politics is personalized, there are higher risks of no changes taking place. Well, a lot of donor money was used or was aimed to achieve modifications in Armenia. They weren't used quite efficiently, since there was no strategy for development in the country. So when the partner country has no own strategy on where to find the growth points, what to strive to in the future, then the macro financial assistance is not very efficient. On this slide, I explain what's happening now in Georgia. I believe Georgia is a very interesting case. They have the internal political crisis and the reform, and the EU is trying to moderate the process. This is really unprecedented. EU and the United States did not interfere that much into the internal politics. And of interest is the fact there is no consensus found in Georgia. There are different political forces that can't come together. Here is an offer from the chair of EU Council, Charles Michel. He named it the way forward for Georgia. First, the party Uniform National Movement didn't join it, and after they did join, then the ruling party, Georgian Dream, left it. Finally, the result of the process was as follows. EU did not provide to Georgia 750 billion euros of macro-financial assistance because the party did not conduct the promised judicial reforms and amendments to the constitution that were promised. In particular, the legal the appointment of the general prosecutor. That's what's happening, disregarding the fact that both political parties are for the European way of development. They believe it's the basic way of future Georgian development, and they do want integration with EU. But the problem is that the political forces perceive the internal political game as a game with a zero sum, and nobody dares to start the dialogue sharing to lose their power. And even very important foreign political partners cannot change the situation. One more point to mention. In fact, all the countries, disregarding the fact that many politologists believe they don't have enough space for maneuver. However, there's multivectorality in these countries, and even Georgia, when signing the agreement about the free trade zone with China and India, at the same time, and thus develop the cooperation with Turkey. However, they compared to they declare that they continue to exclusively cooperate with EU. That testifies their readiness to change the course if the political cooperation with the EU won't be as fruitful as they expect. Now, let me tell you about the values of and interests that are frequently discussed by politologists. And well, here is the experience of cooperation between Azerbaijan and EU. It testifies the fact that these countries become more independent in their choice of foreign political allies that they may enter with EU or any other actor and disagree or agree with them. They can openly criticize certain values, and if the foreign political partner doesn't respond to criticism, this is, well, bad for the perception of that partner. That's it with my presentation.
But let me just mention that currently the Russian Federation is trying to use different cooperation formats with former Soviet republics. And especially they develop interdisciplinary and interdepartmental cooperation between the countries, helping all countries to develop. So, and there is a document adopted which provides the formal basis to develop, for example, the economy of finance of the Russian Federation together with the Armenian Ministry of Finance. And it's a promising avenue to research. It is interesting the way it is set up, established as the facilitating mechanism. And in fact, the best successful practices of governance from the State Agency of Economic Development are being transferred. And I believe with time, this avenue will be more important for Russia. And it is important to identify these best practices and understand what Russia can export as like a product when it comes to such experience. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna, for your interesting and engaged presentation. You touched many topics that were already mentioned, but you provided more details. Indeed, it will be like a point to start our discussion from, but also you gave a good summary, and the further discussions can be developed along the things that you mentioned, like you mentioned the concepts and the soft power. So physicians say, for physicians, if from Armenia you went and enrolled the MIT, say it's like showing the equation, the multiplication of soft mass to soft soft G acceleration. For me, this formula is difficult to interpret because I'm an expert in humanities. Therefore, let us open the floor to comments, to adds on. Konstantin Fedorovich, I saw you wanted to say something. The floor is yours. Konstantin? Thank you very much, Anna, for your interesting presentation. And in fact, it prompted me to several questions, but I limit myself just to one question. It's almost 6 o'clock, according to Moscow time. You described the EU strategies to former Soviet Republic. That's an interesting strategy the EU takes. And in fact, many things can be adopted from this strategy, the way you explained. However, I'm mostly interested in this thing in particular. Currently, the EU is facing their own challenges of functioning political institutions and their own identity disturbances. So whether the political institutions that they are promoting, are they efficient? Of course, they mostly consider the social and economic relations and humanitarian relations. However, whether the promotion of their political institution was successful, because these excellent political programs are relevant and work well in the EU, but they not always work well in foreign countries, and foreign countries just use this as a mechanism to get funding. And when we have elite top officials who come to the high politics in the country, it will not change the country's system, as we see, for example, in Armenia. So is there a positive experience of countries using EU institutions as a model? For example, in Armenia or Georgia or in other countries? Or is it a challenge? And we cannot say that these programs were successful in transferring their political institutions to other countries. Because as we see, there are crises, and then these countries will appeal either to Russia or to the United States, not to the EU. Indeed, there are successful examples, in my view. Of course, there are internal limitations, domestic limitations in every country, because national laws of Armenia and Georgia, they're more or less copied from the EU. And when it comes to law defense, for example, political prisoners challenges in Azerbaijan or Armenia. This is where the EU exerts its influence. And when it comes to the protection of rights and defense of human rights, when there are EU appeals, then countries respond. When we talk about dialogues about in the civil society, there are good examples of cultural programs of many different formats, and the successful cultural and educational programs, to me, this is one of the successful examples used by the EU. However, the choice and deficiency performance of the programs by a specific country, they are widely determined by external or foreign situation. Sometimes we see some negative developments. For example, Nagorno-Karabakh region. EU politicians will provide different interpretations when it comes to the human rights principles and state sovereignty principles. They provided different definitions. When it came to security, well, this is not the content of agreements, it is wider. It is what said by European politicians, and very often things they said worked to the opposite of what they were trying to achieve. And when it comes to political security, this is a vivid example how values of EU didn't take root. Well, the impact onto the political debate is equally important to my mind, because politicians in these countries adopt the European legal language. Even the Azerbaijani president uses such terms as liberties and rights and human rights. Meaning that the EU provides a certain guidance for leaders in these countries. And the area of communications takes its importance. In some areas like security, EU just limits itself to declarations and wording. No specific mechanisms are used, but declarations are published or political opinions voiced, or certain suggestions are given, like countries could have found a different solution. And here the US takes a position of a judge or an arbitrator, and that's an important achievement. Thank you very much. Let me just remind our participants that, very often questions are raised to the last speaker, but we had two more speakers, and we decided to postpone the questions to the very end of the event, meaning we may raise questions about the education and research. Here comes my question about education. I just wanted to highlight one aspect. Mostly, we spoke about like full education or some separate courses. But let us look at semesters, at semester curriculums used by many universities. These are so-called international semesters. Here we mean that foreign students come to universities either as exchange students or outside of this format and study just one semester. For Russian soft power, that's exactly how the format works. And we can use this one semester, one term student programs as an instrument of soft power. In fact, our term programs always existed at UNECON. 130, 150 students would regularly attend. But due to the pandemic, online format attracts only 50 students on average. This is the fact of life. We have to put up with it. It was mentioned that if students study outside of Russia, then there is no immersion into the culture and situation, because the proverb exists, it's better to see one picture is worth of 1,000 words, meaning we are losing this element of involvement, and therefore education online will not work as a soft power tool. In this respect, the Russian language is there, but showing pictures and photos from museums will never be a true substitute to being in the country itself. For example, now let us consider our own event. We're here united online. We can engage the bigger audience, but still everyone would have preferred to really come to the country. Let me share my own experience. This conference has been run for many years. I remember one time We ran the conference on the 9th of May. In fact, not on the 9th of May, but right after the 9th of May, which is the Second World War Victory Day in Russia. And many attendees actually came a bit earlier because they wanted to see how Russia celebrates its Victory Day. So, they saw how Russia shows this immortal regiment. That's a movement. It's a demonstration of families with portraits of war heroes going through the central street of the city. So they witnessed this event, and they come back home. And then I received some sad comments that in Russia you have this immortal regiment event like Memorial March, but we have gay marches. So, and there was no state push for people to come into the streets and carry portraits of their ancestors who participated in the Second World War. Therefore, they were able to witness it. And I bring it up just to mention that digitalization is good, but you cannot digitalize all of your experience. You have to be at the location. We can engage wider audience online and hope this option will stay in the future when we come face to face, and we will have more face to face. Johan, I can see that you wanted to take the floor, and we switch into the English channel now, into the Russian channel now.
Yes, I think we come together also that we make some exchange. And if you allow, I would like to bring in two examples, personal experience in the way of teaching. First one, at Technical University in Vienna, I used for 1 or 2 semesters Second Life in parallel to my real life presentation, to my real life lesson. So we recorded the voice, the audio. I by myself was an avatar in Second Life and used my voice to repeat my lesson. And students were able to listen to my lesson whenever they liked. Short after, I found out that I had more students in internet than I had in the seminar room. And on top, I have learned that many of my colleagues were in Second Life and checked how I make my lesson. So if you like, we are competitors in our profession. And my colleague, another professor, cannot sit in the seminar room and see how I'm doing it. But in the virtual life, it was possible. Second example is opposite. I'm teaching in a European program at Danube University. The program is financed by European Union, and it's a master program for higher education management and research. And the European Union allows maximum 2 students from the same country. So we had at the beginning something around 500. They asked to participate. Then there will be done a selection for 20. So out of 500, 20 are taken. And these 20 are coming from more than 10 countries. As I said, maximum 2 from the same country. I also have Russian students in this program. And this was not possible in the during the Corona, so that means to the COVID. So for 2 years, this program did not work. This year, we could start again, and we had this international crew because on top, they are traveling. It's a 4 semesters program, and every semester is in another country. So they start in Austria, second semester is in China, third semester is in Finland, and the last semester in Germany. And so this is exactly the opposite of distance learning. So they have to learn different cultures. They have to see different languages, different history beside the subject they study. And I think this in parallel is quite important. And I believe in future, we will have more distance learning as we had 3-4 years ago, but we will have both, and both will work quite good. A remark to the colleague who spoke at last about European Union. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, I will talk about world leadership. And here I will give you also a profile about European Union. And European Union is not United States. There is nobody can say we go this direction. So there are big internal problems because these are too many different cultures, too many different opinions. And so it's not easy to manage such a compendium. And we cannot compare this to other organizations. That's what I want to say to the European Union. So that's from my side. I think this COVID pandemic brought a lot of distance learning, and many of these will stay in future, but we will have both. And quite of interest, Czech students, they started last year their university study. They never have been in university. They always had this online training. For them, it's a standard. So they see it different than we as the professors, the teachers see it. So thank you for this, to allow me to give this feedback.
Спасибо большое, профессор.
Thank you very much, dear professor.
Понимать, что
Thank you very much, dear professor.
сейчас меня по-прежнему не слышно?
Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you now. The internet is slow in the evening, getting tired. So I'd like to thank Professor Günther for his comment. It's very important for us to understand and realize that our foreign colleagues understand us and that our positions are either close or coincide on certain important issues. However, when we talk about being European, this kind of contradiction between Russia and the West or Europe, I believe that's an incorrect attitude. Russia is part of European culture and civilization. I keep underlining it. That's of importance to my mind. And one can get to know it when reading the classical Russian writers, and nowadays the progressive scientists are of the same opinion. Well, dear colleagues, if any issues are left, let's discuss them. If not, I'm sorry to take too much of your time. As Professor Günther mentioned, he needs to make a presentation tomorrow, and we still have a day left to tomorrow to continue this very interesting and very fruitful discussion. Thank you. Well, maybe somebody from the audience would like to participate. I would like to ask a question to Ericsson. It is known that MWC courses are mainly on the American platforms. Besides, all the universities have open free courses, but they are less famous and have smaller audience, and their promotion is not a simple thing. Could you please tell us how many Russian teachers are presented on American platforms, including MOOC, Russian language, Russian history. Is it taught at any of those platforms? Are there any obstacles for placing those courses there? Great question indeed. I don't have any statistics on that topic, though it's an interesting thing. We need to find this out in the future. Well, Russian educational establishments, higher educational establishments, are well presented on these platforms, and they provide courses not only on Russian language and culture. Some technical sciences are well presented as well, because Russian and post-Soviet School of Technical Sciences is pretty good, pretty strong. Materials are presented in the Russian language, and quite often they're being translated into the other languages. There are the subtitles or voiceovers being conducted. As for particular figures, there's no info. I don't have it at the moment. And on how to place materials on those platforms, I believe the obstacle, first of all, technological obstacles. Some higher educational establishments just can't afford a good, high quality record for such platforms. And these basic platforms, they regard the ranking of universities. They don't want, say, those from the bottom of the rating. That's it. Well, higher educational establishments do read their courses, and once there came a request from Coursera, they want to organize courses. If you want to participate, please send your applications. I don't know how they negotiated with the authorities of the higher educational establishment, but I believe good relations are necessary before the authorities of those platforms and of the higher educational establishments. Thanks. That's very interesting, because I believe some of our participants are interested how to get in there, especially considering the fact that Russian language is taught by not the language carriers. I remember that in the Baltic countries and in Ukraine, after the USSR collapsed, there was a high interest for the studies of Russian language, to study Russian, but in Russia we were kind of dragging behind with this issue, which surprised me a lot. Yes, so it did happen that my colleagues studied Russian, but not in Russia, using the online courses. Small comment, short comment regarding the Russian language. Well, received my PhD in Korea, and parallel to that, I taught Russian students who are studying Russian, not in Russia, but in Belarus and Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine is very active in teaching the Russian language. So their higher educational establishments kind of stole that opportunity from Russia. Now the situation is changing, but still, okay. We'll see how it works in future. Yes, I had a similar personal experience. I was teaching in Italy, and I was approached by a student from Angola, and in Russian language, he addressed me. So he had an accent, but it was a Ukrainian accent of the Russian language that he was speaking. He said that he lived in Ukraine, in Kiev, and he spoke Russian to me, but with Ukrainian accent. Yes. I also encountered a situation in Italy. It was yet before the year 2014. All the Russian speakers were Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainians position themselves as Russians. I have an acquaintance there, and they socialize with those diasporas. Ukrainians, when in Italy, name themselves Russians. Now, probably nowadays they claim themselves to be Ukrainians. Situations are different, but they name themselves Russians. That's a very sensitive issue, that self-identity. Whatever is more profitable, they use.
Да, я коллеги, на самом деле,
Dear
сейчас
colleagues,
тоже буду зовут дальнейшее, но, впрочем, если еще у нас есть какие-то
if we have some
замечания,
time left, any
или
remarks,
какие-то
questions,
заключения.
follow-ups, conclusions?
Yeah.
Johan, yes, the floor is
Yes.
yours.
So when I spoke in English, it was translated for you to Russian, and I could not control how good the Russian was. But I can inform you, your Russian was translated by the translator to English excellent. Excellent, and bravo to the translators you had. Thank you very much.
Это
Спасибо.
действительно очень важно.
That's very important. Thank you very much. There are no questions left in chat. And once again, thanks again to our highly skilled interpreters. A beautiful translation is like a beautiful woman. If she's beautiful, she's not faithful, but this is wrong in our case. The translation was both beautiful and correct, and it was made with fidelity. Thanks to all the speakers, to all the audience. Thanks, Roman, for moderating this session. Thanks for participation in the discussion. I'm very grateful to Professor Zavershinsky, who actively participated in our event. We are grateful for your attention to your conference. And let me also thank Alena, who provided the technical support of our conference. It all went very smoothly thanks to her. So I'd like to thank each and every participant. Not everybody asked questions, but still we have plenty of listeners. Still 16, though we ran out of time. Hope it's not the last meeting. Some people we encountered for the first time, but we hope for future fruitful cooperation with everybody. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Have a nice evening. All the best.